Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. So today, everyone, we have with us a very special guest, Toya Spencer. And Toya has been on the show before, and it's so exciting that she's come back to join us to talk about a lot of things. We'll hone in on DEI, but there's some other things I want to ask her. I did tell her it might be a surprise, but I think she's ready. And Toya is what I consider to be one of the foremost experts on DEI, not just from the perspective of how it should be applied and where it should be applied, but just the general nature and the power of it. Because who we're speaking to in an audience, you may not live in the United States, but you may have some curiosity about the topic. And I can't think of anyone better than Toya to address that. So Toya, welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast.
Thank you, Eric. It is a pleasure to be here and then to be back again. So, to be asked twice to join, that's pretty incredible. So thank you.
We joked around a little bit right before we started recording about how many DEI folks have I had on the show or we've had on, and you are it. Right. And nothing against anyone else out there who is a DEI expert and all of that. It's just, I'm going to go back to one of our first conversations when our mutual friend, Ruben Miner, introduced us. Mm-hmm. It struck me that you had this balance of, in some ways it was, pure knowledge. I know what I'm doing. This is how it works. But there was a perspective that I thought was healthy, mm-hmm. right? Because let's face it, right, Toya? I mean, there's some people, just seeing the acronym DEI, it can conjure a number of mixed emotions, right?
Yes.
I'm infinitely curious about those who tend to go, well, wait a minute, because for me, that's a cue for the emotions. And you know what work I'm in, we're in. So yes. I'm curious for them as to, well, let's talk about that. What has you nervous? What do you know about it? That kind of thing.
Yes.
So I'm gonna start here, if it's okay with you, mm-hmm. to talk about what's new. And I say it that way because if anyone is on LinkedIn, for example, mm-hmm. there's consistently, you'll see photographs of people at conferences, and you'll see, a company is attached some kind of an article about why it's important, mm-hmm. and you're flooded with that. And at least my perspective is that, well, we've been at this for a while, so give us an update. What do you think is not what do you think, but what is new in the land of DEI?
Yeah. In many ways, I think it's some of the same stuff, right? So some of the same stuff. So you're all obviously talking about people and differences, and how are you creating spaces for people to show up as who they are, their authentic selves.
Yep.
There's also, talk about what does it mean to be inclusive. Mm-hmm. For me, when I think about that, I think you automatically have diversity, right? Diversity mm-hmm. exists because you have differences in people. Yep. Right now, one could argue how granular of a detail do you want to go into differences? Do you want to keep it just surface level and differences in terms of race and gender and, mm-hmm. Ethnicity, LGBTQ plus status, right? But I mean, really at the root of it, each person is an individual. We're all unique. So by virtue of us being people and who we are, you're going to have diversity. So you can have two males, white males, 2 black males, whomever males in the room. And just because on the surface they may look like they're the same, they can be completely different. And so diversity exists just because we're different. The inclusion piece for me is where the intentionality comes into play, where you are saying, as an organization, as a group of people, I am going to, one, recognize the diversity that exists amongst all of us, but I'm going to do something different to create spaces where people feel welcomed and feel like they belong. So
inclusion is a verb.
It is a verb, and it is action, and it's intentional.
Yep.
It is ongoing. It just doesn't exist. You have to do things to make it happen.
Right.
And so you'll see things now where I think there's an evolution in maybe in what people are calling DEI work. So you'll see DEIB. DEIA. So accessibility, the B is for belonging. You'll see J for justice, right? So you will see a lot of those letters tacked on. For some folks, there's intentionality behind that. And that's totally fine. But to me, at the end of the day, the inclusion and then the equity piece, the equity to me is about the access. Like, are you putting things in place where you are making things, processes, opportunities accessible for everyone? And so I think differences, maybe what's new in many ways, I feel like we've been at this thing for a really, really, really long time. Right. And so for many people, it's like, why are we still talking about this? Right. Like, so you have this fatigue from some people, like, honestly, it's 2023. Why do we keep talking about this? Why can't we just get this? And then in other ways, people are saying, no, the fight is, there are things that are emerging. And what I think, what we see that is new, maybe in it is maybe intensity or focused in on certain groups. Where, maybe some groups that maybe felt like they weren't as vulnerable to attack and exposure and intolerance or exclusion. You see like certain groups are now being more attacked, maybe. But so you see that. And so like an example are LGBTQ plus, right? From you start talking and looking at these, Senate bills and things that are in play that are coming after different groups.
Right.
So, but from that standpoint, like that's not anything new. It's just like, okay, now we're going after this group. And in some instances, we're going after kids in those groups, So I think from the standpoint of what is new, like, I don't know that it's new from the standpoint of every people who are doing this work. We haven't let up, we haven't let our foot up off the gas, so to speak. We're still going, but what we're seeing is different groups now that are being targeted, if you will. Yeah.
And what's interesting as you say that, it's almost like you're saying to a group of younger football players, who maybe are making multiple mistakes in a game. And the coach says, I want to remind you what it is that we're doing here. Yes. It's called football.
Yeah.
Because it was around even before it became, quote, popular or maybe that's not the right word. Maybe I'm thinking when it was as vivid or as front of mind, right? Yeah. So in that spirit, Toya, with all that is new and all that is old, what are the current, how do we know that we're actually moving the ball, if you will, down the field, moving forward, right? And I want to be very clear for our audience. I do not believe that there is an arrival because we're dealing with human beings. So it's an ongoing dynamic thing. But I do believe at some level, you should be able to look at what's happening inside of your organization and be able to say, well, 4 years ago, we were here and now we're here as in forward.
Sure.
And hopefully there's some celebration of success,
Absolutely.
Right? And I also know it could be, well, 4 years we were here and actually we've taken 2 steps backwards. What's going on? So how do they do that in the world of DEI to measure?
Sure. So for me, there's when you're looking at measurements, right? Measurement and accountability. For me, that's one of the pillars that should be a part of any DEI, whatever you call it in your organization, any work, right? Because how do you know if you're making progress if you're not measuring, if you don't have key performance indicators that you say this particular things or these set of things are what we consider to be valuable markers or milestones of our success in our organization. So, and that's no different in any organization when you're talking about growth or you're talking about, financial performance. You're going to measure where you are so that you can know if we're making progress or not. And so, like I think that has to be a part of it. But for some people, that could feel close to maybe quotas. I'm going to say that, or, it is not, from my perspective, it is marking where this is where we need to be, because we know if we don't have a goal, if we don't have our eye on, hey, we want to see this progress or this growth at this particular period of time, the chances of you getting there and making that progress are very slim. So
let me ask you this from the perspective of, and I know probably every organization out there, the majority of them would say, yeah, we've done the surveys, right? You know, and is it a case of where a company or an organization may say, well, we want our net score in relation to these three things to be 7 or higher on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Which we all can do the math, right? And we can look at it and go, wow, we're at an average of 8. So that means check the box, we're succeeding. Is it that straightforward? As an example, I know there could be other ways, but
there's certain things that I think you could say, for an example, if you want to say we have markers or we have goals around who we're hiring in an organization, right? So let's just use that as an example where you can say, we have not been recruiting from these places, and say we have a goal that we want to increase women in leadership by, I don't know, 5%, right? In the next year or two. You could clearly say, okay, we would like to have relationships, partnering, recruiting relationships with, 3 organizations. Say we want to go to the Women in Science. So say you're a technology organization. You say we've not been recruiting from these places or these universities or these organizations. We want to develop partnerships with these organizations. We want to recruit from this school because they have a certain percentage of women in their program. Right? As an example. Those are very tangible things. And those are things that you can say, we haven't been there. We haven't done that. We're going to put a plan in place to go there, nurture that relationship, build a partnership, and then we will do that. And you could see your numbers moving up. Now, that's getting folks in the door. That's half of the problem. Right. Half of the solution. The other half is what things are you putting in place that once they are here in the organization, that will support their growth and development as a female in that organization.
Yeah, because, like Toya, I go back into my corporate days and I remember I can go back in time enough and my memory will serve me. I was like the only person of color in a room that I still remember, like the first time going into I think I've lost all my corporate language.
I understand 100% being in public education now. I get it.
I think it was the executive management team, right? And being in those first meetings, and it was just like vivid to me. It was like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
Because I don't want you to lose your thought on this, but how we feel, how that sense of belonging, that sense that I'm welcomed, is a two-way street, right?
Absolutely.
The organization needs to intentionally And they didn't do it back when I was
Yes.
back when the Earth's crust was cooling. I've always wanted to say that.
No, stop it.
But it's interesting to me that in that organization there wasn't an intentional. It was kind of like, well, we hired you. We want you to do the work. Here, sit down, and then okay, let's go.
Yes.
But I do believe if I would have had that extra bit of intentionality around it, I would have felt more welcomed. I would have felt more belonging. Now that's one path of the street, right? Sure. The other path is how I see Eric. And I know that one is the tougher nut to crack probably in general, because like, as you know, Toya, in the work that we do, when we encounter a problem, an opportunity, whatever it may be, boom, comes the emotion.
Sure.
The emotion of fear, the emotion of anger, and all the rest, and how we manage that process.
Yes.
Because now I know for me, because as someone who is a recovering imposter syndrome person, right? It was easy for me to go, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
I'm not. If they find out that I don't have this and I don't have that, then they're probably going to fire me, right?
Yeah.
Now, are they reading my mind? Are they able to go, oh, no, Eric, you don't have to think that. You don't have to feel that because it's okay.
Right.
No, it was me doing the internal war of, no, Eric, don't, no, Eric, it's okay, Eric. So in light of that, right, and this measurement thing, and I mentioned the surveys. Okay, sure. Eric gets the survey, and Eric, because he's got this blend of I don't feel welcomed, and they didn't go out of their way to make me feel welcome. Yeah. Therefore, I'm going to put it as a 5 because I really don't know. Is it the responsibility of the organization to go to both scenarios? Should they investigate beyond just, well, we've got a program, we've got a... What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Well, I will start with this. If you're truly committed to saying we want to do something different and we want to create a culture of belonging and a culture of inclusion, then you will go the extra distance.
Wow.
You will, right? Wow. You will invest. And so if it's important, if it matters, if you see that it's not just lip service, it's not just, today we're going to be a company that signs up to do it and we have really no intention of, then you won't. You'll stop there. You'll stop there and say, hey, look at my program that we have and look at our numbers. You will stop there. But if you say we are committed to this, if you have customers, if your stakeholders, your shareholders are saying, hey, this is not enough for us, like this matters to us, then maybe you'll do it because it matters to those folks. But it's not enough. You can't just say, hey, we're opening the door, you're here, you make it work. That's not how it works. It's not enough. So I do think it's incumbent upon the organization to invest in the people part, invest in the culture part. And yes, it requires uncomfortable conversations. It does, right? Because you have to acknowledge then that you have an environment that maybe historically has not been welcoming to folks who may not be within that circle of what you're used to.
So Toya, I was giving a session here recently and the subject matter about how we come off to other people.
Sure.
And the drill, if somebody's boisterous and loud, we can say, yeah, they're this, they're that. But I think sometimes when we encounter those that are maybe not so vocal, we can kind of jump to our conclusions very quickly. And maybe it's because it's easier, right? This particular person was saying, I'm not that way, but I kind of got the sense that it was, no one has really cared to investigate why. And she made it clear it's not that I don't like people. It's that I don't know what to do in that moment. Right.
Yes.
You and I, Toya, might go as soon as we see someone who's not, engaging, we'll walk over to them or whatever. Right. But in this person's case, it's like, I'm keeping the door, the wall up. And I explained to her about how we manage our emotions. And I had promised them this, hey, I'm going to give you a little exercise you can take with you type deal. And it was the idea of the pause, right? When you feel the emotion, give yourself a window of time, find something that will calm you, allow your prefrontal part of your brain to catch up, the executive function. And after the session, she comes up to me. I can't thank you enough. Now I understand why. I was texting my husband, telling him I learned this.
Aww.
Now, for me, it was heartwarming because I felt like it was coming through. But when we're in these organizations, right, with all kinds of diversity, can I call it neurodiversity?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
And this idea, and which I didn't mention about with this session, was we had this picture of an iceberg, right?
Yes.
That, the surface of an iceberg is only 1/10 of the entirety, right? And we really kind of came together about this idea about, well, we have to be more curious.
Yes.
We have to not, even for the boisterous person, right?
Yes.
Even the person that's in your face, can we pivot to this idea of, well, okay, I get it. You have a very strong opinion about that, and you want everyone to know. Tell me a little more about that. Where does that come from? What was the thing that really got you going about that? Versus going, I don't know about you, Toya, but Eric's, you know what? And then Toya says, I agree. You want to get lunch later? And you and I formed our opinion. There's Eric over there, and we're like, yeah, I already know what he is.
Yes.
Do you really? Do you really? Because you're only looking at that. That's
right.
1/10.
You're right.
So I'm saying all of that to say, what are some things that organizations need or can do to help address that too? Because that's the other part of the street.
Sure.
I'm coming into the situation, and I don't know how to say hi to people immediately, because you mentioned that it is. If you're taking it seriously, if it's important, you should go there too, right?
I agree with you 100%. I love that you brought in this notion of curiosity. And way back when I was in corporate, that is how we talked about crossing those differences, right? That line of differences, this notion of curiosity. It's easy to stay in, your little space and your little box and make assumptions about what you think that person means and ascribe meaning to what you think that thing means. And you, most of the time, are wrong. And so it's this idea of asking or saying, can you tell me more about this? Like, on the surface, I don't quite understand. I think I might be making an assumption about where you're coming from. And I will say I may be wrong, but tell me why you feel that way. Tell me more about that. That to me is such a simple step, but it opens the door for so much learning and so much understanding that I think it is tremendously undervalued.
Do you think that also does that also require some courage on the part of the leader?
Absolutely.
Because you might hear something that kind of runs counter to what you believe the world to be, right?
Absolutely. There's risk involved in that but there's risk involved in anything, right? There's risk in falling in love. There's risk in,
getting in your car and driving.
Right? I mean, seriously, there's risk involved. And for a lot of people, though, that's scary. That's scary. It's scary to encounter someone who might have a different opinion, because what you might realize is that your position was wrong. And what if that person is right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, well, you know what? I never thought about it from that.
But you know what? What you're saying there, Toya, is so spot on, because I've advocated, I've, taught all of the things around this idea about what do we do with these emotions? How are we supposed to handle them? How are we going to manage them? And I think to myself that when that fear comes, I get the atypical responses. I gotta get out of here. I don't want to be here. But if we can draw on that courage, if we can build the courage to go, hold on, you're afraid now. What are you afraid of?
Yes.
What is it that makes you feel afraid?
Right.
Where does that come from?
Yes.
Because if I can go there, and for our audience, I understand some of this can connect to things that are traumatic in nature. It's not me saying, oh, just forget about all that trauma stuff and just go anyway. If you're in that place, it may not be healthy for you to go.
Yes.
But if you are at that sort of level of I don't know, Toya, I want to call it where you're fine, but it's more of you're stable.
Yeah,
let's use that term.
Sure.
If you are stable, to go to that place and be willing to go, wait a minute, I'm afraid because my mom always said that when I encountered this, you better be careful.
Yes.
I don't necessarily know if that's true. I should probably listen and give this person another opportunity or more opportunities to explain.
Yeah.
And hey, by the way, it's okay if I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Nobody's asking for you to turn in that particular badge. But the real danger is if you do allow the emotion to drive you.
Yeah.
In the sense of driving you to making decisions that are going to rob you of maybe an opportunity, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've seen that play out. There was a situation, I was facilitating a training, and this particular training session was around implicit bias. And I had a gentleman stand up. Man, this was such a moment of vulnerability, and I was so proud of him for doing this. But he stood up in front of the class and he was like, hey, I just realized that I've been judging this person in this class, right? They were in the room. This is a big risk. Talk about risk.
Yeah.
And he said, I realized I've been judging him. I don't even know him, but this is what he said. I was taught, and he's from the South. He said, I was taught by my people, grandmother, whoever, that if a person wears this, a flag, right? American flag on them, that this meant this person was this. They were, racist or somebody I needed to be afraid of.
Right.
And he said, I realized I judge this guy right here who's wearing this hat. And this guy, I've been watching him, having conversations with him in this session, and I couldn't be more wrong because this guy is a great guy. And he said that in front of the room, stood up in the room and said that, apologized to the person. And I saw them afterwards having a conversation, and it was like, man, like I was wrong. The point is that he was able to be reflective, be able to think about where is this fear or where is this opinion or this prejudice or this judgment coming from? And is there any legitimacy in this? Is there any merit in what my parents, my people told me all these many years from being a young person all the way to an adult? But he said, I've been faced with new information that challenged my thinking, said to me, you're holding a bias against this person that is unfounded, right? What are you going to do with this new information now that you've been given new information? Are you going to hold true to what you knew and what felt comfortable to you and what everybody in your family told you was the truth? Or are you now going to say, wait a second, that's not true? And am I going to take a risk to get someone to know someone differently? And I will tell you, it was a courageous thing to do. Was everybody in the space ready for that? Not necessarily, but that freed that person.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Freed that person. And then the person who he was speaking to, it was like, man, and so it was a moment for the both of them to recognize. And then he was telling stories about his experiences, right?
Yeah,
and so it just became this exchange of, this is what I felt. And then this person said, this is what I grew up with, what I felt in this exchange of.
So Toya, this really kind of makes me think about, this game that especially I would consider in the United States, where we come to our encounters with people, wherever it may be. And it's almost like we're doing this, we're preparing for an audition. How do I look? Where's my clothes? Are these the right clothes? Okay. Yeah. What's my educational background, and what's my career background, and where do I live? And as if everything in life is a freaking audition.
Yes.
And I think the times where I've found people get the most, it's like this collective exhale, is when we can go, we're all flawed. We're all struggling with one thing or another.
Right.
And those that say they're not, they're lying.
Exactly. There's something,
right?
Because we're human.
That there, right?
We
Boom, ding, mic drop.
Human, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right. And that part of that human experience is the flawed, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking more and more, if we can set an environment or an atmosphere, a condition, where when people come in the room, it's like, let's get something straight. Every single one of us could compare notes about what we are struggling with, where we have failed, what we missed. This is not an audition. This is not a place to impress. Okay. Let's just get that off the table. Because I think sometimes for those people who maybe were a little like apprehensive about being vulnerable are going to say, oh, this might be a safe environment after all. So
that's my job. That is my job as a DEI leader.
Yeah.
In wherever space I am in, is to create that environment where people have grace, that culture grace, that cultural, what I've read to be cultural curiosity, and to set a space for people to know you don't have to be perfect when you have this conversation. It's okay to stumble, to say the wrong word and be like, okay, I'm nervous to say this. I don't know exactly how to ask this question, but that's my job, to set that space for people, because I know that is difficult for people to lean into these conversations. And so whenever I'm facilitating, whenever I'm like having a conversation with people, I put myself out there first. I feel like that is my responsibility to do that, to create that space, to let people know it's safe here. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to say the right things. We will mess up. Guess what, guys? I don't know everything there is to know about diversity. I don't.
Yeah.
I still hold some biases and things that I have to struggle with, because why? I grew up in this country, right? And I'm faced with all of these micro sort of, like micro messages and things, right? I grew up in the public education system in the United States. Like, I'm a part of this society. Now, I do challenge those biases, and I do challenge the things that, is that really true? But I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I don't get it right all the time.
Yeah, and you're so on mark there, Toya, because we spent a fair amount of time in some of these episodes and some of the other outlets about core beliefs and the power that those core beliefs have. And I've mentioned it on previous episodes. There was a time where I was really convicted about it, because when I saw a talk from a psychologist who just outlined, this is the power that core beliefs can have on people, and here's just where they come from, and on and on. And I remember I felt such an urgency to tell my son and daughter, who at this time were already adults, right? Young adults, is that you have got to check your core beliefs, because as a flawed person, as a human being, I was not the perfect dad. I wanted to be. Yeah. I desperately wanted to be, but that is impossible. So I influenced you, and core beliefs are formed more often than not in those early years, before you and I or anyone else had the opportunity to have that critical mind that would say, well, wait a minute, my dad said that I should never trust a person of this particular color.
Yes.
How does he know that?
Yes.
Where does that come from? Any person with just because of the pigments, that's my criteria. When you're 8 years old, you're not developed enough. Yes. So what happens? And I'm going to, this one, my experience is I go, that's how I'm to see the world.
Yeah.
And when I told my son and daughter, as I said, you got to do that, because you may have developed that core belief more out of a survival tool. How do I live inside of this family unit where your dad or your mom says those people or that person? You got to check that. You got to ask. You mentioned, you uttered it, Laura, but is it true?
Yeah.
Is it true that every person from that particular group?
Yes.
What evidence, what data do you have that shows that is so? Because I got to tell you, there's about 70 million of them, or there's about 150 million of them. You're probably going to find that they're isolated events spread out across that particular culture. And yes, there may be something institutionally that got into the system.
Yeah.
But is that core belief still going to serve you? And, Toya, and you're a parent, sometimes, you utter it and you hope it sticks. And then you kind of just go, well,
yep,
we'll see. Right.
Yes.
But in the end, I had to do it.
Yes.
I mean, because if you don't, you'll just ride with that because as you know, and I have to give him credit because he's the person that I picked it up from the term. Josh Friedman from 6 Seconds. We interviewed him for one of the podcast episodes, and he says, our brains can normalize just about anything.
That's true.
I mean, and when you think about that,
that's a little scary.
It is
a little scary,
because the daunting reality that, what? If you want to drink until you cannot see straight every single day, your brain will eventually get to a place to go, okay, let's do that. Yeah. We got to do that. That's efficient. That's easy. That's
yes.
Boy, this is big.
When you talk about your children, my son, he just turned 9 and he is probably the biggest accountability that I have. Like I will say something and he'll be like, well, Mom, why is that? Or Mom, and I'll just be like, what? He is not meaning to do this. And it's so interesting because the way that I grew up is you didn't ask your parents why. Oh, sure. There was none of that. Yeah. And he's not asking me to be disrespectful. He's asking me out of
genuinely curiosity. Yeah.
And so when I say these things, I can't just put it out there and not be able to explain.
Yeah.
And it's not really a justification, but I need to explain to him because his curious little mind that's being formed, all of these things are being foundational is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
For him right now, he wants to understand and make sense of it. And so, wow, he keeps me on my toes and he's like, well, Mom. And so I have to sit there and go, well, why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
And then is this something that I want him to believe as true? Is this something that I want to be a core value for him? Right. And so, I think even as a parent, he's made me be a better professional, a DEI professional.
Yeah.
He really has.
Yeah. I've got to ask, sometimes I know it's not just this, but I'm going to go with the social media, the marketing, the whole PR around DEI. It seems to a lot of it be focused in on the workplace.
Sure.
Right. Is that sort of and I'm not going to hold you as you got to make you have to be the arbiter of, is it this or that? But is it designed just for the workplace or is it supposed to have an impact beyond?
Oh my goodness. When I thought about that work and even the way that I think about it now, in my role, in a school district.
Yep.
For me, I think about it as, whatever we are talking about with our students, for example, I hope they go home and talk to their parents. And I hope that extends beyond parents into their lives as employees or community members. I think it's a broader conversation. I think it's a human conversation in terms of how do we engage with people who are different? How do we live amongst people who are different, from us? Like, to me, it's yes, there's if you're an organization, I think it's smart business to do that, to say there's certainly financial opportunity there and growth. And if you look at research of companies who, do diversity and inclusion well, there's correlation to increased profit. But I just think as humans in general, global citizens, it is, in my opinion, and people may argue, but it's like the key to our existence and peaceful, sort of harmonious living with people who are different.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I think there is, wow. Because what immediately comes to my mind was Jesus and the Samaritan woman.
Yes.
And for those of you out there, I know I'm not getting into, I haven't put on a robe and I'm not going to be preaching here. But it's a wonderful story that relates, right? Because Samaritans were, I think at that time, in that era, they would have been what we would consider to be of mixed culture, right? And they were half breeds, as you might describe it. And the Jews would have nothing to do with them. They looked down on them. I mean, it was out and out, straight up racist, right? And Jesus decides to go visit that area. And what's interesting, Toya, and you may know the story, right? It was out of his way. It was, you would not do it. No self-respecting Jewish man, number one, would go and talk to a woman who happened to be a Samaritan. Right?
Yes.
It was such a beautiful encounter and exchange, right? And I'm thinking to myself, when you mentioned what you did, I'm going, if I have an exclusionary mindset, harmony can't exist there. It's counter, right? If I'm going, not to mention the fact is like, what does your life look like? If you're like, I only think these people and not these people, and I'm still on the fence about these people. I mean, I can't imagine what kind of peace could you have, and just as a living human being walking the planet. So that brings me to another thought from that side, right? You mentioned about someone reflecting on. I noticed the gentleman in the workshop, taking the opportunity to reflect. My opinion, as you just went, I don't see our culture as being very reflective or curious.
I agree with you.
So can the corporate C-level, senior level leader effectively embrace DEI if they're not reflective and they're not curious?
I don't know how you do it if you don't.
Because it would seem to me it would be essential.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know how, because to me, that's existing in a position of pride. And if you are a believer in the Bible and you look at scripture and what it says about pride, it doesn't end well for people who are very prideful, right? In terms,
and even if we took scripture out,
we take it out.
We could probably look in our own families and go,
it's not,
I tried to tell them. I tried to tell them, right?
Pride does not generally lead to
good outcomes.
Right?
Right.
So I don't know how you do that, because I think great leaders are people who are reflective. They have a degree of humility. They are vulnerable, right? But if you view leadership from a way where it is top down and I have to know everything and I have to be this person that is leading you, I don't view leadership that way. I take more of a servant leadership perspective. And so you're engaging with people, you're walking alongside of them, you're learning with them. But I don't know how you do that if you're not reflective. I don't know how I'm a good wife if I'm not reflective, if I'm not a good mom if I'm not reflective.
Let's take that term of reflective, because I want to be how would I say this, Toya? That there might be some that say, what do you mean being reflective? Do you mean I got to sit in a room for an hour and meditate?
No.
So when someone says, okay, Toya, what do you mean by reflective?
Sure. So for me, it is something happens. So say I'm at work, I have a conversation, or and it usually starts where I'm not necessarily settled on how that interaction, or how that something came, right? There's this little thing for me, and I'm not saying that's for everybody else. I'm like, not sure that was the best way, or just not, right? It's kind of like you feel that little thing and you sit there and go, wow, what could I have done better? So I'll give you an example.
Right.
This happened to me. I put some information out, and we were celebrating a Heritage Month, right? And so put this information out, and I will tell you, I put a lot of work into those things, a lot of research. So let's just talk about this. This is my work product, right? And I'm doing this work. And so I'm like, this is a great product. I'm helping you. You're learning. I'm giving you resources and tools. And got feedback, an email, and something that I put in there was offensive. I was perpetuating a stereotype from this person's perspective, okay,
Yeah.
about their group. So they were part of this racial group, and they were like, wow, like, I felt like this information that you put out there was really stereotypical, and it was offensive, right? And they asked to meet with me. Okay. Now, I will be honest. I was a little bit like ruffled feathers, like, what? Like I put something out here. I'm the diversity person. Like, what? And you have a problem with what it is I'm putting out there? Just keeping it real. So I'm driving over there, right? And I'm like, okay, all right, Toya, like, come on, like, work on being like open, right? So I get there, have the conversation, and I can feel that my face is probably not like the most welcoming. Like, and so I'm managing through those things, those emotions, being mindful of my body language, mindful of like my tone as I'm having this conversation with this person. And they expressed, and I said, okay, thank you. And then I was invited the person in to help me in the future. Like, hey, would you like to be a part of this? Because there is work involved in crafting, this particular resource. So I did all that, left, and I was like, okay, that was better than what I thought. But on my drive back, I was reflecting on what was said, what they said, what I said. And I realized that I never apologized for causing harm. And I was like, oh, I said all these other things, but I did not clearly say to this person, wow, I unintentionally caused you harm, and I apologize for that. And so upon reflection, when I got back to my desk, I crafted an email and said that to that person.
That's a beautiful, beautiful description of reflection. And I don't know if you felt it or at that time, but when I'm hearing that reflection, how would I say it, Toya? It seemed to align yourself to the better way, right?
It was the better way,
right?
But there was humility.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy.
It was not easy.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we're not saying this is easy. We're not saying that it feels good.
Yeah, because you know what? I sometimes believe, not sometimes believe, that's not the right way to say it. I don't believe that I can get my thoughts to match my words here. Life it's not designed to be nice and tidy and easy. I think we've done a poor service as a culture to give people the impression that somehow you could find a way to make it easy.
Yeah.
It's not. And I would dare say, I'm not in the DEI space, Toya, but it would seem to me, if you are not a reflective leader, you're not a curious leader, you really need to probably call a timeout and do some deep dive, because I think there could be harm done.
Yes.
Because I think what typically goes on the other side of that coin, if you're not reflective and curious, is the judgmental thing.
It's
the,
yes.
I already know you're wrong. I don't know what you felt, but what you felt was not correct. And any person of blah, blah, blah would know blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
So what I'm thinking about in the DEI world, as far as, because it seems as if, there's a robust career path that people can kind of chart out.
Sure. And
I get it. My hope is that 99.9% of the people that are going into it because they absolutely, they say, yes, I'm a reflective leader. Yes, I'm a curious leader. And yeah, I need to get better at it, but I believe in that. And I want to see change. I want all these things. I know reality would say it's not that high of a percentage. So this is kind of a launching point into, is there anything in that world that you're looking out over the horizon and go, that's concerning. That concerns me. And maybe it's within the practitioner realm, or maybe it's just in the organizational thing, but let's maybe start with the practitioners and that kind of thing.
Well, I will just say this is not a kind of job, from my perspective, that it's like, oh, it's just a normal job, right? Like it is. I mean, I guess you can.
Do you mean that in the sense that, okay, it's not just like, oh, I'm the senior vice president of operations. I'm director of sales.
Correct. Because there's so much, in my opinion, that is related to people and that is related to, I feel like helping to shepherd people or show them a path forward that involves a lot of courage, that involves a lot of vulnerability, right? And that is like you can go get a degree, go get a certificate in like, inclusive leadership, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
there's there's programs that exist now. They didn't a long time ago. When I was, in graduate school, there was not anything on DEI, right? Or inclusive leadership. It didn't exist. Yep. So there is certainly course content around that. My opinion is to be really effective and to bring about that shift and change. I think it's more than that. I think for me, what I realized, and I will just speak for myself.
Yeah.
There is so much of myself in me living what it is that I say, that I bring to this job that is not just a degree. It's not just
a certification.
No, I feel that way. And it's maybe because I feel like this is part of my purpose. This is what I'm here to be doing. And so it's not just a job, because I could have just a job right now in corporate or just a job in, wherever. But for me, I feel like this is part of why I'm here. This is part of my gifting to bring people together, to help people lean into discomfort, lean into curiosity, lean into that, because I do feel like there's a better way. And sometimes people just don't know how to get there.
Yeah. And I would say if there was the ability for you to record something like that by video and then have like all the major organizations that are either pondering or just starting and hiring, that they could say, hey, you need to watch this video and you need to really consider, because this is what this work is, right? And I know that requires the organization to be truly committed, because, I think I'm okay because I paid for all my sins. So I can say this about corporate America. I don't think that every organization that's plastering all these wonderful platitudes and are actually fully committed to the end person. And I'm talking about the end person as being the business analyst in the cube who happens to have a mixed ethnic, if I can spit it out, a mixed ethnic background or a different gender. I mean, whatever it may be.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because to me, once again, we can all put these airs on and we can have all this trapping, and it looks really cool and it sounds really like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's how wonderful. But if that person sitting in the cube, as I described, looks at you like, what are you talking about? Or looks at you and go, are you talking about this place? You're talking about my manager?
Yes.
Then, I mean, therein lies why the authenticity and the reflective and the curiosity is so vitally important. Because I get it, Toya. Even if all those boxes are checked with the leader, that's not a guarantee that just magically everything, because I know people who are, just, if I can say these terms in this age, right? They're far on the right.
Yeah.
And they believe that if we just did 1, 2, and 3, then you need to stop and that's it. End of story. They're very judgmental, very dualistic. It's either black or it's white. And then there's those that are on the far left of the equation who believe revolution is the answer. And of course, then I go, so have you thought about what happens after the revolution is complete? Whatever, right? But I'm just saying that because in between those poles of argument and shouting is that business analyst who's just trying to figure out, what am I going to do for this next thing? How am I going, my kids, my neighborhood, my aspirations as a human being?
Exactly.
So From the perspective of and I'm going to kind of throw this one by surprise, but if you had to say, what are a few things if you were in that senior level to hire that person in DEI, what would you say you're looking for?
So, I was thinking about one of the things that I wanted to say, and I actually was asked to write an article that was similar to this. And one of the things that I said is, and I believe this, is who you hire, meaning the person that you hire in that seat, is one of the most important decisions that an organization can make when they're looking for someone to lead this work in the organization. And I mean that person. So is that person reflective? Is that person a courageous leader? Because listen, there are moments where I have to decide, and I have made decisions that, okay, this is the right thing for me to say and the right thing for the organization to do, but this is not a popular decision. And so in that moment, I'm assessing the risk and saying, do I want to do this? Right? Do I want to say, hey, guys, this isn't the right thing. This isn't the path forward. This is not how we want to do this work in our organization and be authentic. So I think you have to have some degree of courage. I think you have to recognize that even though you may not be the CEO for this work, you are the person that is setting the tone for your organization and how you should be doing this. So for me, I think in my seat, I should be the person where people are like, man, like there's something about her leadership, her presence that makes me want to connect with what it is that she's saying, right? Like wants to connect with what it is that
you're kind doing. Of being the attractor to the curiosity and the reflection again.
Right. I shouldn't be the DEI person and people run. When they see me coming down the hallway. Right. There's something wrong about my leadership or my style. If I'm repelling people, if I'm saying as an organization, we need to be a place where people feel like they're welcomed and they're belonging, I need to live that. I need to bring that energy and that presence. Right. And that's what I'm saying is sometimes what can happen is that we feel like we DEI people feel like it's our job to correct people and say, this is where we're wrong. This is where we need to be. And then not be the person sometimes that is giving people grace to make mistakes, right? Because sometimes it's like, well, dang it. Like, really? Are we really right here as an organization? Are we really dealing with that thing? Because it's frustrating. Because we know where we need to be and we know like we should be past this as an organization, as a society. And so that can be frustrating for us. But the reality is I have to learn how to meet people where they are. And that's hard sometimes. It is hard because you're just like, oh my God, are we really still having this conversation? Am I really like, because this is what I live every single day, but that's not what everybody else lives every single day. Right. I have to be the person that says, hey, let me help you. Let's have this conversation. Let's figure out how we can get from here to here. And so that's why for me, as a DEI person, in this space, you have to have your thing, whatever that is, that keeps you grounded, that keeps you in a place where you don't get fatigued, right? So I know there are boundaries. I know there's certain things that, you know what, I'm not going there. I'm not doing that. I can't read certain things. I can't watch certain things on TV because what I know that it does, it can make me angry and it clouds my ability to be a vessel, if you want to call it that, or to be that person where I can live in the space where I can give people grace. I can give patience to people, right, in situations. Otherwise, I could be in that same space. So I can't lead with anger. So I have to make sure whatever it is that I am doing in my personal space, in my professional space, that I have to be clear to be able to lead in that way.
And, Toya, you just connected on something around I consider to be these essential foundational tools to hopefully, hopefully it gives people an opportunity. It gives them resource to be able to grow that muscle of what you're describing, right? Because I know with our work in emotional intelligence, it's that ability. Can you manage what you think and feel to the decision? Because some people, as you know, if they don't have that, then default comes into play. I get angry when my dad screams, so I'm going to scream at you. I'm sad, so I'm going to do what my mom did, and that's like I'm running. When in reality, if you're a leader, you can't run away here. That's not going to produce a good outcome.
No.
So let's learn how to address where that emotion, what part it's playing in this scene, right? And, obviously our motivation is to help people build a practice around that. I sometimes, in my optimism, I like to believe that the intention is honorable as each time we have the engagement, right? You said something there about how you're managing your life, about watching certain things on TV and what you listen to and all of the rest. And I think what you just described, at least what I'm hearing is it is a person, a leader who is building their resources, right? And we never know how much we need our resources until the time that we need them.
Yes.
Right. And if there's a leader out there who maybe they just were hired in to do the work, and maybe they're going, wow, Toya, I didn't think about that. And wow, that doesn't describe blah, blah, blah. Well, certainly those of you in the audience, if that fits your description, we'll have Toya's contact information. So you'll be able to reach out to her. But my point is, I think so many of us, we fail to realize that each day we're given an opportunity to build these resources, right? And I love how you're intentional about, no, Eric, I'm not going to watch that because that's going to interfere with, right? Because that's a form of building resources. Because there's going to come a time where there's going to be that person or people who are from a certain segment. Again, look at my description earlier, right, left, or whatever. And you're going to be the leader that they are going to rely on to be that light, to be that, oh, wait a minute, she's not shrinking. Wait a minute, she's not insulting back. She's asking me questions. She's calm. Well, you and I know, Toya, you didn't build the calmness last night. Anyway, you didn't put it in the oven 20 minutes on 425 and then pull it out and then magically.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And I love that. And that's my hope for our audience is that build your resources. Every single day you have an opportunity. And I have encountered, and I've been there where, man, if I would have built those resources 5, 6, whatever number of time you want to attach to that, I'd be better able to handle this situation.
Yeah.
Because now I'm faced with, I can only, stealing from David Tubley. David, if you're out there, thank you so much for this quote. It is still resonating in my brain. I can only draw on the resources that I have available at the time.
That's good.
That's
right.
That's all I can do.
That's right.
Right. And I get it. I can pray, God, I need a miracle. Please bail me out. I get it. I understand that. But there's a level of maturity and responsibility as leaders that says, okay, Eric, you're not some newbie. You're not some, I had no idea that this existed. You know the drill. You need to be putting in the work. You need to be working through these things.
Yes.
I want to kind of end on a story.
Sure. Yeah.
And my gosh, see, I knew it was going to be time just flying by here. So, and I've been mentioning this to a few clients in the past week. I stumbled upon an interview last week, Toya, with Michael J. White. I think it's Michael, the actor.
Yes. Yes.
Did I get it right? Is his first name Michael?
Michael.
Okay.
Yes.
So he's being interviewed, and the interview was a little older. I hadn't seen it before, but it was about, the interviewer was asking him about Will Smith and Chris Rock and what happened at the Oscars. That's probably been 2-3 years now, right?
Yep.
And Toya, he said, oh, that really hurt. So Michael J. White, I've seen him in movies, but I've not really ever listened to an interview or read an interview with him. So I'm going, oh, this is interesting. And he goes, in so many words, and I'm poorly paraphrasing, you probably can find it on YouTube out there. I believe it was Vlad TV that did the interview, but in so many words, Toya, he said that Will Smith didn't put in the work. He didn't do his work. And when he said that, I'm going, I wonder, is he talking about the work that I think he's talking about? And he was. He said, the danger is that if you have not addressed these things before you get power, ultimately the power it'll flip the script on you. He said, because when you get power, the people who once would be willing to call you on stuff begin to fade. And in comes those who tell you everything you do is great. Everything you said was wonderful. Everything was appropriate. And he said he didn't do that work. So when the moment occurred, he didn't have anything to rely on to do what would have been the better decision. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, I'm just sitting there, and again, it's still, this is within the last week or so. Yeah. I don't want to be in that spot. And I get it. As a human being, I probably will be at some level. And to that level, probably not, I hope. But I know one way I can increase the chances that I won't. Is that if I see the deficiency now, if I know I got this thing, Toya, that it's gnawing at me. Gnawing at me. The reason why I'm afraid, is that, and I see it. Don't run the other way, Eric. Just, it's kind of like, okay, I'm just time out. Okay, fear, go ahead.
Right.
Talk to me. What is it you want to tell me?
Yes.
I know I'm going to flinch. I know I don't want to necessarily be reminded, but go ahead. Because if I don't disarm you, I got trouble.
Yes. And it will show. It'll come up. If you haven't dealt with it, it will show up. Can
I have that repeated about 50 times, Toya? Because
you think you're escaping. You think, I'm by it. But if you have not put in the work, if you have not addressed those things that are your demons, so to speak, or are those things that are vulnerabilities or fears or whatever, it'll show up.
I got something for you within that. Okay. I know, and we're starting to run over, and Brett, hang with me here. So what would you say if a hiring manager, and I guess in this case, maybe it's going to probably be a senior level leader, said, hey, Eric, hey, Toya, have you dealt with your demons? Have you dealt with those things that trip you up?
Yeah.
Do you think that question would, maybe you'd say from an HR perspective, that's not appropriate.
No, but and so technically not really an HR person.
Right.
But I think that's a fair question.
And I know it could be worded
you could
differently.
Say it differently. Yeah. Like, how do you, how have you handled maybe challenges that you've had in your life, or what things have you done, or what things have you overcome, and tell me how maybe you overcame them.
Could someone could someone go even that route of, so what are you doing now to work on becoming a better
Absolutely.
leader? What are you currently working on? What are the areas of deficiency that you know to be true?
Yes.
I used this in a session recently about game film. I'll ask them, the whole idea of one of our competencies, you may remember, is recognizing patterns. And I'll say, this is kind of like game film.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And why do we watch game film as a team? Well, we want to know what our opponent. Well, have you watched your own game film? Do you know how you are typically, you know when this situation?
Yeah.
And
a lot of times we just don't know that in and of ourselves. We have to create space for people to be able to be honest with us and tell us those things. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That is hard.
Yeah.
Do I always want to hear from my husband?
All right.
Toya, I see this. My natural first thing is to sort of deflect that or be defensive when I hear that. This is not easy.
Yeah.
So again, you talked about this. And I think, again, we do a disservice to ourselves and to our children when we say things are going to be easy. They're not easy.
Yeah.
None of this is easy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel good. But what I will say is that I am glad for all of the things that I have gone through before I arrived to the seat where I'm leading DEI in an organization.
Yeah.
Because 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, I should say, because I've been in this role for 3 years, but 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready.
Yeah.
And I don't want anything before it's time for me to have it.
Yeah. Do you think, I go back to that Michael J. White interview about power. And obviously, if you're hired into the role, director level or above or whatever, you're being given power. Yes. And I want to be clear for our audience. I don't think this is just isolated and directed only to folks in the DEI space. Because I think far too many leaders, regardless of what role, they have not had purposeful training on how to handle power.
I agree.
And maybe I'm missing it. Maybe someone out there would say, oh, no, the universities now are making that a high priority. I'd have to check with my son, but I don't, I'm just saying, I don't think that it's as front of mind. I think it's more of an afterthought, unfortunately, because all of us, and I'm going to speak for my corporate career, it was the pursuit of attaining power, obtaining it, right? And if somebody would have stopped me and said, hey, do you realize that thing that you want so much? Do you know what it is? Do you know what it can do to you? Have you done any look back at history? Have you look around you? But I would have to say, no, I haven't.
Yes.
Because for me, I was so laser focused on what it would mean when.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm saying this to everyone out there. It's not, my story is irrelevant outside of the fact that it may prompt you to go, well, oh my gosh, well, how am I handling power? Do you have somebody around you that you could go to say, hey, I need a gut check here? Do you still have people in your life that are willing to call you on it begins with a B and it has an S in it. So, right?
Right.
Do you have those people?
Right.
Right. Have you felt like those people are those that, no, I'll call them back another time, or I'm going to tell them I'm busy. And you only have time for those people that tell you how great you are, because
that's a scary place.
Yeah.
No, it really is.
Oh, Toya, we haven't even gone. And at some point, we haven't gone to your career.
Oh, we don't have to go to my career, and that's okay. But what I can tell you is that is a scary place, because what I realized is that the platform that I've been given is a gift. It is a blessing. And so what I do with that, it matters.
Yeah.
And so what I realize is what I say or how I invest in people and what I say to them can make the difference.
Yep.
And so it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is that I will tell you, I never ever wanted to be in the number one seat, like for diversity. I never wanted to be leading it anywhere. And maybe because I knew the responsibility that went with that, right?
Yep.
Maybe, I don't know. But I take it very, very, very seriously. Right. And so
I would tell you, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay.
I was alluding to your career because what came to my mind was you had a front row seat when you were with Abercrombie, and you got to see what power did and can do to people.
Yeah.
And I say this again, as a human being, we all have those times where we've been given power and we abused it. And hopefully doesn't rise to a level of legal type situation.
Sure.
But I just think, Toya, that one of the prerequisites, again, regardless, we're obviously subject matter today is DEI, but any leader, any organization, if you're wise, you'd make the handling of power a a thing that you really pay a lot of attention to, because it's real. I mean, it's real. Toya Spencer, my gosh. I know it took almost 2 years to get you back in studio, but I'm so glad we had the opportunity to talk today. And certainly we're going to have you back.
Oh, man.
Less than 2 years, though.
Hey, listen, whenever it's the right time, it'll be the right time. That's so beautiful. I'm just thankful to be here.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much. Everyone out there listening, we appreciate you tuning in. Until the next time, take care.